What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. So growing up, one of my heroes growing up was The Rock, right? I was a humongous wrestling fan. I got put on the wrestling from my older brother, God rest his soul, and my big cousins watching it with them, right? First time I really watched it was really with my cousins. They were in the Robert Taylor projects. We would go to school. My auntie would babysit us after school. My auntie lived in Robert Taylor's. And we'd be all like, after we'd be watching, I started watching wrestling with my cousin. My cousin Bobo was heavily into wrestling. And the first time I saw The Rock, I'm like, yo, who is dude? Who is that guy? He was the epitome of cool, swagger, and most importantly, he looked like me, right? When I looked at The Rock, I thought of The Rock as a black man. You know, me being what, 5, 6, I really had no understanding of somebody being biracial or anything like that. I just know that The Rock, like his persona, seemed like the black dudes that I grew up with in my neighborhood. The brash persona, flashy, fly, and his skin tone was dark, right? So I'm looking like, oh man, this is a black man, right? But I learned that a lot of people didn't look at The Rock in that manner. What do I mean by that? Do y'all know to this day there is a segment of people who really still don't even look at The Rock as black, or don't even know that his father was a black man, right? There are people who know this and still don't look like, oh no, he's not black, he's not black, he's not black. And simply look at him as Samoan, or some people just look at him as something other, right? And I want to talk about how The Rock's racial ambiguity has helped him throughout his wrestling career and throughout his career in the entertainment industry as far as making movies, right? You see, in wrestling, even though The Rock looked like me with a dark skin tone, flashy, fly persona, he was never marketed or made clear to represent black folks. Outside of being in a Nation of Domination, and for that short span, he was only marketed as black when Farouk was at the helm at the top of the faction, right? As soon as Farouk left, the Nation of Domination became watered down, and it was not geared towards really anything black. It was just a cool little faction that was just, that would still say stuff like by any means necessary, but it just had black people in it. It was stable with black folks in it. And then Owen Hart came in too, whatever. But the black ideals and the pro-black stance left as soon as The Rock became the head of the stable, right? And then I started, and this is from me being a wrestling fan, I started to look at how he was presented to the public and why. I started to just try to think about why it was this way. Again, you see, it's a lot of white folks that did not look at The Rock as black, and a lot of black folks obviously look like this is a black man. Older black folks say, well, he mixed with something because of the hair, texture, and so on and so forth. He got a different type of look, but you could tell it's black all in him, right? But there's a lot of people that didn't look at The Rock. A lot of wrestling fans, white wrestling fans, looked at The Rock as other, right? And this helped him during his ascension. What do I mean by that? Wrestling fans, for the most part, it's a lot of the humongous part. It's all different type of races of people who are wrestling fans, but for the most part, a huge contingent, the majority of wrestling fans are white, especially during that time. Because a lot of the stars in wrestling were white. People that a lot of white Americans could identify with, could relate to. Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, you know what I mean? All these different white wrestlers that people could really just relate to. Kevin Nash, etc. And when you have, especially during that time, The Rock's rise came during the late 90s, early 2000s, right? But he first started to gain steam in the late 90s. People like to think that, we were a post-racial society after the civil rights movement and etc., but we weren't. There was still a lot of racism in the world as it is today, even more in the late 90s than what people even recognize. There were people who, and Vince McMahon knew this, there were people who wouldn't be comfortable with a black man really being the face of the company. And I believe that they purposefully geared him to not fit into the black lane. And I believe The Rock he was fine with that as well, because if you look at the story of The Rock's father, I have Rocky Johnson's book, right? And The Rock is my favorite wrestler all time. I have his book, and he explains how he got kicked out of the house when he was about 12 or 13 years old from his mom. It's black. He's a black man. His mom. And after that, I think it severed ties to Rocky Johnson's family at that point, right? His father was deceased, and I think it severed ties between Rocky and his family. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I don't think had much relationship with his black side of the family. He was raised and brought up in a Samoan, with his Samoan side. So I believe he was more comfortable identifying with that side. Even in previous interviews, where people talk about him being black, he'd be half black, half black. He was quick to point out he was half black, half black, half black. Not so fast, half black, half black, half black. He would always do that, right? And I believe, Vince McMahon knew, with him being so charismatic, him being just so, he was a great wrestler, he had a great look, all of that, right? He was great on the mic, he was entertaining as hell. They knew that a lot of the white fans would have a hard time rooting for a black man in wrestling that was dominated by whites for so long. So we're going to market him as Samoan, maybe other, not really black. And The Rock was fine with that, because he really didn't identify with a lot of certain things black outside of playing the character of The Rock. When you see, first of all, I remember watching The Rock in interviews outside of wrestling, and he was different than what his on-screen persona was. Not just different because he was playing a character, it almost seemed like he was putting on like, I hate to say it like this, like he was putting on like a little bit of, like he was putting on his best representation of a black man from an inner city when he was on camera, but in behind closed doors, that wasn't really who he was. You know what I mean? And then, so I would see him like, he's really not comfortable in that aura outside of wrestling. And when you look at The Rock became just so famous, people were so enamored with him, Vince McMahon knew that women loved him. And it's a lot more digestible for a white American father to see his daughter swooning for a guy like The Rock who's racially ambiguous. Ambiguity means the quality of being open to more than one interpretation. So you don't know inexactness. You don't know what he is. You can't place him in the black umbrella. A lot of white fathers probably felt more safe with their white daughter swooning over a guy that he's not really black. Okay, it's okay. He's a little lighter. He's not, he doesn't really give off the urban vibe all the way outside of the character. Okay, he's acceptable. He's fine. He really doesn't identify with black. He became more digestible for white America in that way. Even in his movie star career, right? It helped him in Hollywood, because so many of these Hollywood executives fetishize The Rock's phenotype. Him and Vin Diesel's, because they have this ideology that by 2050, that the world will be full of people that look like The Rock because of all the interracial dating and marriages, etc., right? And it helped him get over to audiences in certain ways. He became more palatable when you market him as Samoan or other, not really black, right? And Vin Diesel knows this, which is why he keeps a shaven head to hide that afro he got. It ain't really just because of the hairline. It helps him be more open to other audiences, open to interpretation, to be white, other, Italian, whatever he wants to be. The Rock he's marketed in a way like that as well. Look at the movies he plays in. He's Polynesian in the Fast and Furious movies, even though I don't really watch their movies. I don't watch those movies. I never seen those movies, right? But I can tell he's marketed towards Polynesian side, and from my friends who watch it. Look at his other movies. In his other movies, he's married to white women. His kids are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white children in movies, right? Because they put him under that racially ambiguous umbrella, and it makes him more palatable to audiences. And it helped him skyrocket, even in wrestling. Him being not looked at as black helped him skyrocket, man. again, man, he was marketed as Samoan or other or racially ambiguous in wrestling, quite frankly, because Samoans are treated way better than black American talent in wrestling, second only to white talent. Let's be for real. The Samoans outside of the white wrestlers, they was running wrestling. So you can market him as Samoan and racially ambiguous, but not really black. And you can give him that big push with him being acceptable and palatable to the white wrestling fans, because hey, he's not really black. He doesn't count, even though his daddy black than a motherfucker. Look at Soul Man Rocky Johnson. You hear me? But he became more palatable to wrestling fans and in Hollywood. So it's quite interesting to see, even though The Rock is my favorite wrestler, it's the truth.